Creating a mood board is an essential foundation for any brand identity project. And so, it's important that you get it right. As when it comes to designing your brand identity, it's your source of truth to fall back on if you're struggling with design direction. And so in this video, I'll be crafting 2 mood boards for a chocolate brand that's all about the small bursts of excitement that you get from tasting impactful flavors. I'll take you through my process for mood boarding, using the brand values as a base to create 2 different design directions that express these values in different ways. I'll also share some tips that you can put into practice that can help strengthen the concept of your mood boards, helping you feel more confident when pitching your design directions to a client. So without further ado, let's crack on with the video. Right, so the first thing that I do when creating a mood board is to go to Pinterest. And on Pinterest, I would just create my own custom board, just so that any pins that I find can just be saved in one place. And this is also helpful when working with a client because I can get them to send me their Pinterest board so that I can have a better understanding of what they want for their brand. But it's important when you create the mood board for your clients and yourself that you need to be on the lookout for particular things. So the first one of these is typography. You want to be looking out for words and lettering that match the feel of the brand. So because we're going for a fun chocolate brand here, I was on the lookout for bold typography that stands out, big colourful letters, big energetic shapes, really trying to find chunky fonts that match the energy of biting into a chocolate bar. And I like to really include typography because it gives me a sense of what the logo type might look like in the end. So because we're mood boarding for a chocolate company here, I'm really trying to steer away from those lighter weight fonts, maybe even steering away from the fonts that have serifs on them. Just keeping everything sort of big, bold, playful, and energetic. You know the vibe. Another thing you really want to be on the lookout for is colours. So you really want to try and find colours that match with the message of the brand, the feel, the tone. So for the chocolate brand, for instance, you really want to steer away from like dark greys, black tones, because they don't really draw that sense of excitement that you would get from eating the chocolate. And I often find that when I'm curating a mood board for colours, I don't actually go out and search for colours specifically. In my experience, when you're saving your images to the mood board on Pinterest, the colours often just come together naturally. So with the chocolate, obviously we're going to get a lot of brown tones, but we might find some colours such as red or yellow or purple, like to match with candy or maybe like a fruit filling. And obviously the more images that you save, you'd get a better sense of what kind of colours would be going into the final mood board. So don't worry too much about colour because it will just come naturally the more images you collect and the better sense and feel that you get for the brand. So the third thing that I look for when curating a mood board for a brand is the type of photography that the brand would use. Now, this does a really good job at conveying the type of feelings that you want the brand to get across. So with the chocolate brand, for instance, I've got a lot of pictures of people smiling while eating chocolate. Obviously, we want to steer away from people who are sad eating chocolate, but I don't know why you would be because chocolate is fantastic. So in this case, we're after pictures that would elevate the sense of pleasure that you would get from eating the chocolate. But if you were mood boarding for a more corporate brand, you might want a lot of imagery of employees in suits or employees collaborating together, or even people working at a computer, that sort of thing. And the last thing you want to be looking out for, especially in the case of retail brands, is different types of packaging. And I do this because it allows my clients to see what the packaging might look like at the end of the design phase. So in the case of the chocolate bar, I was looking for packaging with bright colours, bold typography, something that really makes you want to pick up the chocolate bar off the store shelf and take it home with you. But for some businesses, packaging might not be an ideal element to put into a mood board. Let's say you were mood boarding for, say, a lifestyle YouTube channel. They probably wouldn't need packaging in their mood board. Instead, I would probably incorporate some sort of items of clothing like a hat or a t-shirt, just to show what kind of merch ideas that the channel might have. And another one would be maybe a more corporate brand, which probably wouldn't have packaging either, but they'd have things like business cards and stationery. So in the case of the chocolate brand, definitely try to include packaging for chocolate bars. But if you're working on a different type of brand for a different business, definitely try to include items that they might use in their line of work. And also, just as a warning, when you're on Pinterest, nowadays it has kind of been taken over by a lot of AI imagery. So I tend to avoid it when making my mood boards, just because it can look a bit unprofessional and a bit sloppy. But if there is no other alternative, I don't see why you can't put AI imagery into a mood board. Just don't use AI to create the final logo because you will be in trouble. If you can't find exactly what you want on Pinterest, you can always try Pexels. They have a wide range of free stock imagery that you can use. And you can also try something like Cosmos, which uses an AI-powered search engine to try and find exactly what you're after. But yeah, if you're stuck, just shop around on different websites. Try and find different images that would suit the brand, because you never know, an image that you might actually want might just be on a different website. So take your time and enjoy the process, because you really want the mood boards that you create at the end to be cohesive and give a strong sense of direction. Okay guys, so we are actually now back in Adobe Illustrator after curating our mood board. So we've got the images here that I've just downloaded from Pinterest, and what I'm going to do is I'm just going to get the rectangle tool and I'm just going to make a few squares. Probably not like that actually. Let's duplicate this over, duplicate that over once more, and then I'll get that, bring that down there, and then maybe delete the one in the middle. Actually, no, we're going to keep the one in the middle. So we've got our grid here and we've got our images on the right hand side. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to drag the images over to the grid. And I don't know whether these need to be in front of or behind the grid. We'll test that now. So they need to be behind the grid.
I'm a dumbass.
So if I put that behind the grid just by holding Shift, Control and left bracket, yes. So we're going to select both of these at once, the image and the square. And with the image behind the square, what we're going to do is press Ctrl and 7 or Command 7 on a Mac. Then you want to double click into the square and you just want to resize the image so that it fits in the mood board. Make it larger, make it smaller, show some interesting parts in the squares. There we have it. That's how you attach one of the images to a square in your mood board.
Yeah, boy.
So I'm just going to go ahead and do the rest of the mood board while commentating over it, giving you some tips and tricks, some helpful information on how to make it more cohesive, and we'll be right back after that. Right, let's start the process of arranging your mood board. One of the biggest tips I can give when arranging images into your mood board is to try and keep it dynamic with a bit of variety. And one of the easiest ways to achieve this is basically just enlarging the images, maybe put them on a bit of an angle just to add a bit of movement and intrigue. Also, if there's a particular part of an image that you quite like or you think might be important for the brand, make sure to highlight that just by enlarging the image and making it the focus of the square. Another thing that I like to do is avoid having similar images next to each other on the mood board. So by that I mean try to avoid putting typography next to typography. Try to avoid putting pictures of people next to people, and also if you can, try to avoid putting colours of similar shades or hues next to each other as well. That way you can bring a bit of harmony and balance to the mood board just by changing the squares that the images are contained in. And don't worry if the colours in your images are a little bit off at this point, because I've got a tip coming up in a minute that will help bring all the colours together and bring a lot of harmony to the mood board. But one final tip is just to not overthink it too much. If you've placed one of the images in a square and you just think, oh my god, this is fantastic, this is exactly what I want.
Nice.
You know, just go for it. There's no right or wrong answer. Just trust your gut. Play around with the size and rotation of the images. Move the images around a bit. Try and find a layout that works really well for you and the brand that you're designing for. And 9 times out of 10, it will all come together naturally and you will be golden. Right guys, so I've got my mood board kind of how I want it. I've got a lot of bright, bold colours, a lot of wiggly, bold, bubbly fonts. Perfect for the chocolate brand that I'm trying to go for. So I think now what I want to do is pick some colours out. And to do that, I'm just going to grab the rectangle tool again, and I'm just going to make a little column down here of, say, maybe 6. Ooh, what is going on with this rectangle? Oh no, that is not correct.
That is not correct.
So we've got our square, and what I'm going to do is I'm just going to duplicate them down just to make a nice line. And so I'm just going to grab the eyedropper tool and hold shift while clicking on a color in the mood board to just copy that color to the square. And I'm going to do this for every square. So I'll get that purple there. I'll get some of this lighter brown here, maybe in the chocolate. Yeah, that's nice.
Nice.
And I'll also get a darker brown too, so I'll look for a darker shade, maybe something like that. Lovely, lovely. Get the eyedropper tool again. Then I think I'm gonna go for maybe this light blue. Yep. And then I think to finish it, I want like a bright orange color. Or maybe maybe a red? This is difficult. Okay, so I ended up getting more of a candy red color. What I'm going to do is I'm going to play around with these colors, just tweak them a little bit just to make sure that I've got the brand the way I want it to be. And then I'll show you some tricks on how to more cohesively align the mood board with those colors. While I was picking the colors for this mood board, I was laser focused on trying to pick colors that represent the different hues of the candy that's in the pictures. In my head, I was thinking of the many different colors you would get in sweets such as Skittles or M&Ms. So I ended up going with like a bright yellow, and I also picked a shade of artificial orange that really brought to mind images of citrus fruit and zesty flavors.
I'm not zesty. Stop calling me zesty, please.
And I also went for an artificial purple tone and an artificial blue tone to showcase the more fruity flavors that you might get with this type of candy. With the purple color, I was thinking of that American grape flavor that you can get in American candy stores. Very artificial, very bright, very sugary. You know it's really bad for you, but you can't help but eat it. I'm a sucker for the American grape Fanta. I think it's one of the best Fanta flavors, but it's really expensive over here because of the import tax. But whenever I'm in an American sweet shop, I can't help but pick it up because it is one of my favorite flavors. I don't know, the E numbers and the chemicals just call to me, what can I say? And for the blue, I was thinking of that sharp, tart blue raspberry flavor, bringing a bit of sourness, a bit of freshness into the mood board. And for the last two colors, I decided to get 2 shades of brown to represent the chocolate. I picked a lighter tone and a darker tone, but also kept them quite warm, just to balance out with the bright, sharp colors of the candy. So to summarize, I was really trying to maximize the brightness of the candy colors, while using the warm brown tones to just mellow out the color palette a little bit and make it more usable when it comes to design application. Right guys, so I'm back after adjusting the colors a little bit. I've just kind of upped the hue on all of them, made them a bit brighter, a bit more vibrant, just to suit with that candy chocolate kind of vibe that we're going for. And I've included some like more mellow, more chocolatey tones just to kind of balance the palette out a little bit, because you have to have balance. You can't just have big bright colors because it would just be overwhelming. You need to have some sort of balance. I mean, it depends on the brand, but the chocolate shades are perfect to bring that balance into this color. So now what I can do is I can just copy one of these colors, double click into the mask, paste it in, move it through. So overlay the color on top of the image. And then with the color in the mask selected, I'm going to go to the opacity panel up here, and I'm just going to play around with the blend modes a little bit, just so that I can get some form of different color on the image below it. So if I go soft light here, and then if I reduce the opacity down to say about 50%, already you can see that brings out more of the orangey tones. And so what we're going to do is we're going to go through and apply the colors to most of, if not all of the images, just to bring the color of the brand into perspective and make the images more cohesive. My biggest tip when using the blend mode trick is to just have fun with it and experiment. Try using a variety of different blend modes and different levels of opacity to achieve what you want. I know oftentimes for me, the screen and overlay blend modes work really well, but sometimes that can be detrimental because you can surprise yourself at how well the other blend modes work if you just reduce or increase the opacity a little bit. For example, on some images, hue and saturation blend modes might not work very well, but on other images, if you reduce the opacity slightly, you can get a really cool effect. So don't be afraid to experiment, play around, mess on. The process is messy, but that's part of the fun.
Oh, party, yeah.
And if you're really finding that none of the blend modes or opacity levels work for you, what you can do is just take a different shade of one of the colors in your color palette and use that instead, as sometimes this can bring out the intended color that you are looking for within the image. So definitely don't be too strict on yourself. Don't be afraid to bend the rules a little bit. Have fun and enjoy it. Right, so we are back after overlaying the colors onto the mood board. I've just done a side-by-side comparison here. So we've got the unedited mood board here, and then we've got the edited mood board here on the right, which looks a bit more brighter, a bit more bold, a bit more in your face. Perfect for the chocolate brand that we're trying to go for. And you can get a sense of how these small tweaks can really add to the bigger picture of the mood board and make it more convincing. So for example, if we take these chocolate pictures here and put them side by side, you can see that this one here, because I've overlaid one of the brown tones on it, that it's actually got a bit more of the brownie tone in the picture, which just brings the colors together and homogenizes it a bit more. So yeah, you can see how this one trick can really bring life to your mood boards. Just by overlaying the colors and playing with the blend modes and opacity, you can really bring together a more cohesive sense of direction, which can hopefully let you convince your clients a bit more of the direction that you think is suitable for the brand. In the case of the chocolate brand here, you can really see that the overlaying of the colors really has brought out the hues and the tones a lot better, and I think it's looking fantastic.
It is fantastic!
But guys, we have one additional mood board to do, and obviously this mood board is going to go in a slightly different direction. So I'm going to use all that I've explained up to this point to create a different mood board with a different direction, while keeping the core elements of what the brand would want in the mood board. With the second mood board, my goal was still to capture the sense of pleasure and excitement that you get from eating the chocolate, but just portraying it in a slightly different way. So in my head, I was envisioning that you'd come home from work, you'd sit on the settee, put the fire on, open your bar of chocolate and just relax. Focusing more on the mellow and fruity flavors that you might get from a more natural chocolate, rather than a chocolate that's filled with sweets and candy. I basically used a lot of chocolate images that also had fresh fruit in them, so I've got like cherries and cherry blossoms, and also images that had chocolate with a natural fruit filling. So we've still got those thoughts of intense flavor, but it's just more of a palatable flavor. For the photography, I was leaning less into a bar of chocolate, and more into, oh, I've waited all day for this bar of chocolate, I can finally unwind and relax. If that makes any sense for you, it makes sense to me. So the images lean into being a bit more sensual, making the chocolate look almost a bit sexy. Definitely leaning into the more temptation side of chocolate, almost kind of what like Galaxy do with their advertising. For the typography, I was still going for the bold and weighty fonts, but I was going down a more vintage route because this is definitely for a more mature audience than the first mood board was, relying a little bit more on feelings of nostalgia and good times gone by. When I was choosing the colours for this mood board, I used the eyedropper tool to capture a deep red and a pale pink, not only to highlight the deeper, richer flavours of the fruit, but also to showcase the love and passion that you would get from eating this chocolate. I also captured some green shades in this colour palette just to highlight the more natural flavours and earthy tones of the brand, but also to push forward feelings of jealousy and envy that you might get if you saw someone eating this chocolate and you didn't have it. You know, you would see someone eating this chocolate and you would be really jealous and envious that they get to eat it, but you don't. Also, it just makes it feel a bit forbidden, like you know you really shouldn't be eating this chocolate, but it's just so good that you have to. And this is accentuated even further with the brown tones that I chose. I've got that almost dark brown maroon shade just to highlight the temptation of the chocolate and also the deeper flavors that you might get with this one compared to the first mood board. Kind of like a dark chocolate that's really rich in cocoa. I also picked out this mocha shade of brown, which really adds some maturity to this mood board. It's a more earthy, grounded color. Again, it also looks a bit like caramel, so leaning into that temptation even more, really making you feel like it's a bit naughty to eat this chocolate, but you really have to anyway. And so of course, finally I moved on to using the blend mode trick, just taking the colors from the color palette, overlaying them onto the images and trying to bring the images closer together, get more of a cohesive and strong vision. I swear I've said cohesive about 15 times in this video already.
No, it's true. It's true.
But you know, cohesion is definitely the word, because the more cohesive the mood board is, the stronger the direction will be, and the better chance that you have of convincing your clients that this is the direction that they need to take. So we now have the second mood board done. It's a completely different vibe from the first mood board, that's for sure, but it still keeps the elements that the brand want. So you've got the bold typography, the sense of joy that comes from eating the chocolate. They're just portrayed in slightly different ways. So the first one really amplifies that sense of fun. So you've got the feeling of biting into the chocolate and finding like maybe a piece of jelly or a piece of candy, similar to, let's say, Cadbury's Marvelous Creations, which is one of my favorite chocolates. It's got those bright popping colors with the yellow, purple, blue and orange just to represent the more candy side, the more fun energy that you would get from eating this kind of chocolate. But moving on to mood board 2, you've got that sense of maturity and relaxation. Maybe you have a bar of chocolate after a long day of work and you want to relax, and it really brings that sense of calm, that sense of tranquil. I think I've really hit the nail on the head with this one, actually.
Look how she ate that.
And with the color palette from mood board 2, it really brings that sense of nature, natural ingredients, sort of the deep red that might represent like the filling of the chocolate, the jelly in the middle. Like, oh, that kind of chocolate for me is just top tier as well. And also bringing in the more deeper brown tones for this chocolate, maybe representing a deeper, earthier, darker flavor that you might get. Now, I don't know why, but mood board number 2 really reminds me of, you know, that chocolate that you get from Lidl, like the Polish one with the like cherry filling. Ah, yeah, that chocolate is so good. And I'm getting really hungry now just looking at this mood board. I really should go to Lidl and get some of that chocolate. But yeah, we've ended up with 2 different mood boards, very different directions, but still keeping some of the same elements that the brand would have asked for. Both of the mood boards share that sense of joy. They've both got that bold typography. You can also see that the flavor just oozes out of both of them, so much so that it makes me hungry. But while they have these similar elements, you can see that they're just portrayed through a slightly different lens. So obviously we went playful with this one and a lot more mature and earthy with this one. So it just goes to show that when you're doing a brand identity project for a client and they provide you with a particular feeling that they want their brand to convey, there's never just one route to the solution, because both of these mood boards encapsulate the sense of happiness and the bursts of flavor that we were looking for, but they're done in 2 completely different ways. When I started putting these mood boards together, actually, I felt like I was more inclined to design this one because I am a big fan of like the bold, bright colors. But looking at it now, I actually think I'm more inclined to design this one just because I'm liking the contrast of the reds and the pinks against the dark browns and the greens. I think there's real potential with this one actually. And who knows, in a future video, I might actually go down this route and design a brand identity with this in mind. That might be a hint. As usual guys, thanks so much for watching this week's video. And obviously, of course, I'm going to ask you to like, share, comment and subscribe. Please do so because it really helps me out. And if you want to check out more of my content, you can click on these videos right here. And that brings us to the end of the video. So I'll see you next week guys. Bye.